Good afternoon and welcome once again to Clash Course. My name is Joey Livingston and my co-host is Greg Brahe, and we are here to argue. Once we stop arguing, what will happen, Greg?
Well, once I stop arguing, hopefully you'll learn something.
Greg, this was supposed to be a
we'll see how
special
that goes.
moment. He doesn't understand when we're supposed to fight and when we're supposed to be on the same team.
I'm sorry.
Once
I'm
we
not
stop
getting the visual
arguing,
cues.
this show ends, because that is what this show is for Greg and I to argue, or for you to argue. If you would like to join in the argument, you can either take my place or take Greg's place. You just need to email us and tell us that you want to do so. So far, we've had a lot of response from viewers telling us why we're wrong, but we haven't had anybody who wants to take our place. So anyways, we have been talking about the existence of God, and honestly, Greg, I'm wondering how long this discussion is going to go on. There's part of me that thinks that this is what this show is going to become about, because I'm not sure what a theist like me and an atheist like you have to argue about, except does God exist, or is it reasonable to believe so?
Well, it's funny because as far as I can tell, you're essentially a panentheistic atheist, which means that we're, pretty much across the board going to agree on things. That's maybe we should argue about stuff that
Greg,
we
listen,
agree.
if you're going to throw insults at me at the beginning of the show, I'm just going to walk off the stage.
Oh, well, that was my plan last week. Unfortunately, you didn't get any that were good zingers to get me riled up. Instead, it was just my mom.
Nobody calls me an atheist. Anyways, I'm just kidding. I want, before we jump back into the discussion, I want to read a letter that came into us that I found interesting. This letter was written by a gentleman who's been watching our show. His name is Michael J. Ashworth. Hello, Michael.
Joey, I am having a lot of trouble hearing you right now.
Really? Can you turn me up on Skype? Any better now?
No, it's. I think it might be a connection issue, but my connection's strong.
Do we need to take a break? Is it really bad?
I don't know. I'll let you know. You're clear right now, but It was just freezing and skipping.
Just don't move.
Okay.
All right. So Michael writes, and you jump in here if it's cutting out, because I want you to hear this. Okay. Okay, Greg.
All right.
Michael writes this, and this is a fairly lengthy, but I'm going to read the whole thing because it is all meaningful. I was just on your YouTube channel watching the May 26th episode of Clash Course, in which Greg and Joey ran direct...
Joey, it's frozen up on me again here. I'm not...
Okay. Let's take a break for just a moment. Don't stop recording on Ustream. Let's just close the curtain. And I'll walk back there, and I'll help my crew get a better connection for you. We'll be right
hang up
back.
On me and call me back.
All right, welcome back, and sorry about that. We've got Greg hopefully fixed up. We'll see how it goes. Okay, that's a shame. That was a Michael Ashworth's moment of fame, and it was ruined by your crappy internet connection.
My crappy internet connection, huh? Sure.
I don't want to argue about this. Okay.
I thought that's what the show was for.
Michael writes, I was just on your YouTube channel watching the May 26th episode of Clash Course, in which Greg and Joey ran directly into my wheelhouse with a discussion of physics, astronomy, and the sciences in general. Greg, we do not want to run into the wheelhouse of a physicist or an astronomer ever again. Be careful of that, okay? Take a note. All right. I started to write a comment and then felt the need to write another, and by the time I got to the third comment, they were each individually too long for the YouTube comment field, and so I now resort to email. This is how long this email is. He just described it.
Wow. All right.
At about 41:30, Joey tries to equate the empty space of the universe and the empty space between subatomic particles. That doesn't work at all, since on any kind of a macro scale, there is matter and the space between matter. At the subatomic scale, that model breaks down, and particles become better represented as probability fields, where instead of matter and space, there is simply a volume wherein there might be an interaction. So you're going to have to argue about probability fields later. Okay. In the moment of the interaction, there is a particle and whatever it is interacting with. But when the interaction ends, the particle ceases being a discrete entity and becomes that probability field again. So you and I are both full of probability fields.
Okay.
How does that feel?
It feels like still being me.
Does it feel weird?
Probably.
Nice one. All right. Then at 43:30, Greg responds with an analogy regarding the reach of forces, using Voyager's passage outside of our solar system as an example. This is more of a technical correction than anything, but the threshold that Voyager passed was not one where it is no longer affected by any gravitational force, but where the dominant gravitational force acting upon it is that of the galactic core rather than our sun. Likewise, our sun is not isolated from gravitational forces, as it too is being pulled by the galactic core, defining its orbital path in the galaxy, and the orbiting planets, producing a slight wobble in its orbital motion. At 47 minutes, Joey makes a comment about scientists holding to the null position being incapable of moving steady forward, which is utterly absurd. A null hypothesis is what you default to. Should your experimental hypothesis not be borne out? You're loving this part, aren't you, Greg? You're eating
so far, everything has been great. I mean, a technical connection is all I've gotten, so I like this guy.
If, for example, we see a new star in the sky and hypothesize that it is composed of hydrogen and helium, but a stellar spectroscopy experiment shows spectral lines that don't remotely resemble those of hydrogen and helium, then we discard the experimental hypothesis and default to the null hypothesis until we have an experimental hypothesis that matches with the data. To address the debate as a whole, I'm not sure that proving the universe is conscious gets Joey any closer to his conscious and willful creator, CAWC. I don't know how I'm supposed to read that. Let's, for argument's sake, grant that the universe is conscious, willful, and self-created. I have objections to two of, or potentially all three premises, but there is a key question in which we are left even if we grant all of them. How could the universe be conscious and willful prior to its self-creation event? Consciousness, as we understand it, appears to be an emergent property of a complex brain, but if we grant that the universe behaves similarly enough to be equated to a body with an advanced brain, then how could the universe have been conscious prior to its formation, creation? Even if that understanding of consciousness is too narrowly defined, you have quite a task ahead of you to demonstrate that its entity's consciousness can exist prior to that entity. Let me see how much further I have to go. Oh, Lord Jesus. Okay.
Oh, Lord Jesus is the fire.
Sorry. Some of my old Christian habits coming out there. Oh, Lord Jesus. Save me. save me from this letter. There's quite a bit more. I'm not sure that I guess I'll continue reading it. Are you interested in this?
Dude, again, so far I'm really
I
enjoying
find it
this.
kind of boring, don't you?
It's very technical.
I don't
Technically,
know. I don't know. This guy
destroying
didn't
your
seem
position.
to know what he's talking about. I'm just kidding. Alternatively, when you define a deity as a, I guess I'm just going to read it. If you define a deity as a conscious and willful creator, does it not have to have all of the properties, conscious, willful, and creator at the same time? If not, then I think your definition of deity is becoming broad to the point of nearly losing all meaning. If your position is that the universe was initially not conscious, and by extension not willful, and its self-creation is merely shorthand for coming about through unguided natural processes, then you and I would find ourselves in agreement. From there, saying that the universe eventually became conscious and willful would make for an interesting hypothesis, but even if it were born out of a sufficient amount of evidence, I would say that discovery would merely ascribe two more properties to the universe rather than defining it as a deity. To put it another way, at the beginning of the discussion, you discarded the three omnis that are usually used to define a deity by the monotheistic religions. We cast a wider net with that definition. I'm going to, well, there's not much further to go here, but fair enough. If we then discard the requirement that all three of the properties of a conscious and willful creator must be held by that being at the same time to fit the definition, then we further widen the net. If you want to continue widening the net, you can eventually just define a deity as a thing that exists, in which case I'm happy to concede that under that definition you can easily prove the existence of a deity. I have a desk lamp. It is a thing that exists, therefore it is a deity. I have a wristwatch. It is a thing that exists, therefore it is a deity. I have a big toe on my left foot. It is a thing that exists, therefore it is a deity. That is the only thing that I would agree is a deity, Michael. And so on and so forth. Where your big toe. Where do you stop broadening the definition to ensure that the term deity remains meaningful without making it so narrow as to be easily falsified? In any case, I have been enjoying your show so far. The casual debate format you've adopted is great for attracting a wide, diverse audience without allowing for the kind of sophistry that the likes of William Lane Craig will use in a more rigid, formal debate. I hope that Clash Course has a lengthy and successful run and continues to grow its audience throughout. Sincerely, Michael J. Asworth. P.S. Rereading this aloud, lewd quote minds abound whenever the acronym COCK gets used. He used that several times. Anyways, a long one, but I thought that it was very meaningful. What do you think?
I agree. I think that I really appreciate the time and the effort put into that. As I've admitted on multiple occasions in the past, I am not an astronomer. As a matter of fact, I have a habit of accidentally saying astrology when I'm trying to say astronomy. That's how little I actually know about the subject. It's just I don't know, a verbal thing that I do, and it annoys the crap out of people who get really upset about that.
I also noticed that when you mention biology, sometimes you accidentally use the term palm reading.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know whether I want to go through this. I have some comments to say about it. I don't know if it's worth. I mean, do you want to go back through this and comment on it, or shall we just move on?
Well, I did want to say something on it. Is that I agree very much, and actually, that was I did a decent amount of research coming into the show this week because I feel last week, what with being a little sick and cloudy of mind, I did not, and also lazy, I did not do the research that I had intended to do coming into it, to talk more about consciousness and the live debate format really changes the dynamic of my ability to look up things and to cite things. And so there is a...
do you miss Google?
Yeah, I do. I actually read something today saying, is Google God? I posted that. That was an interesting one. Google's as close to omnipotent and omnipresent, omniscient and omnipresent of anything on Earth. So, interesting thought. But anyway, I really appreciate that because that's a lot of what was covered there today, specifically the widening of the net aspect. is what I wanted to focus a little bit more on today, and the idea that we've spent a lot of time speaking in great detail about the possibility that the universe itself is
Okay,
conscious.
well, hang on just a minute.
But
You got a turn last week in which you certainly had the opportunity to ramble on as long as you wanted, but you didn't, and I don't know why. I certainly would have, but you didn't, and so now I feel that I at least have some turn. Is that fair to say? Like to jump back into it from my end? Would you?
so you're saying that you want to ramble for a while?
Yeah. Well, actually, I would like to take the time to address some of the points that.
Oh, please
Mr.
do.
Ashworth
Yeah, that's
made.
what I was saying. Is
Yeah.
that I just wanted to give my
Okay.
commentary and saying thank
All
you
right.
because that was covering a lot of things I wanted to cover. So yes, you responding to that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go back through this and kind of look it over here for a moment. All right. His first paragraph where he talks about the subatomic particle interaction. I'm fine with. We got into that at the end of the show last week, and when it was over, I really started to wonder why. It seemed like we were just. You claimed that there was that things lost connection in the universe, which I thought was completely absurd, and then we began to pretend like we understood subatomic particle interactions and
Physics
its
at every
relationship to
scale.
the universe, which was a lot of fun. But and I still disagree with you. But let's see the next paragraph. Let's see. Okay, I do want to talk about this one because you didn't say anything about it, and it's worth saying. He corrects you technically. Greg responds with an analogy regarding the reach of forces, using Voyager's passage outside of our solar system as an example. This is more of a technical correction than anything, but the threshold of Voyager passed was not one where it is no longer affected by any gravitational force, but where the dominant gravitational force acting upon it is that of the galactic core rather than our sun. So this gentleman, Mr. Ashworth, obviously has, I believe, and I may be wrong, but I believe that he is of an atheist position. He does not believe that there is a deity out there. Wouldn't you say?
That sounded pretty accurate, specifically when he was talking about a big toe being the only god he would believe in.
Well, that's the one God he
I
believes
thought
in.
made it pretty clear. Right.
Okay, but what I want to say about this is that what I said to you last week is that I don't think that we have a universe in which things their effect on each other just snaps just at some point like a rubber band, but that rather they go from the measurable to the immeasurable. Now, I'm not an expert on this. There may be a point where things do reach a null and they no longer have any gravitational or any such effect on each other. But I don't think that it can be said that they have no an object on the left side of the universe all the way to the right side of the universe, and the two objects on two extreme sides of the universe can be argued to have no effect on each other. Even if you argue that, even if you somehow prove that they have no direct effect on each other, to say that they have no effect on each other, I think is foolish. And you believe that that's possible.
Well, I think you're widening the net a touch, to use his terminology there. But
Well,
I'll
we
say
didn't
that
define that net. You just made a blanket statement that there were elements in this universe that had no effect on each other. We never defined that net.
that's true. But I think that generally the conventional senses would be what most people would consider the sense in which a person is using the term and saying no effect.
I
Typically, in a conventional sense, means no direct and measurable effect.
Well, if you're talking about you're a typical human being that thinks about effect in terms of I pushed this thing with my finger and it moved, okay. But we are somewhat dabbling in the scientific. And here
We're
I
talking
have
a bit about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon here, right?
Well, I'm actually talking about the Michael Ashworth Bible, in which he says, and I quote, let's see, Likewise, our sun is not isolated from gravitational forces, as it too is being pulled by the galactic core, defining its orbital path in the galaxy, and the orbiting planets producing a slight wobble in its orbital motion. So he's saying that that the sun is affected by the gravitational pull of the galaxy. And so what he's saying here is that for example, the Voyager may not have some measurable our sun may not have a measurable effect on it, but it certainly is affected by the gravitational force of the galaxy. Likewise is the sun. Now, I think it's safe to conclude that the galaxy also is being gravitationally affected by other elements within our universe, wouldn't you say?
I don't know. I just say that depending on how we're going to define effect. I think I actually went on to say during that show that the galaxies were the largest areas of disconnect. That in between galaxies you have massive amounts of empty space, and they don't appear to have any relational effect upon one another. At least most galaxies. There are some I know that interact with others in measurable ways, but the Milky Way galaxy, to the best of my knowledge, is not orbiting anything or part of any other system.
Well, I'm learning something here. I'm just dabbling in this idea. It was something that we got into last week, and I can't claim to know. It seems crazy in my mind to think that our galaxy can sit out there in the universe unaffected by anything. And you're saying that there's so much empty space around it that might be true.
It will be affected by things like dark matter, dark energy, and of course the creation of the universe itself, the Big Bang, has given everything sort of an outward momentum with the expansion of the universe. So that's a larger force, and this is, again, I don't know that much about it, but I do know that the galaxy itself is still going to be moving, and all of the other galaxies tend to be moving away from one another. I think that's related as well to the dark matter side of it, but I don't know.
I feel like if you can establish something in between two things that affects both, that almost inevitably you have to concede that those two things have a relationship to one another.
A relationship is different, though, than an effect.
Maybe you're right. I'll have to think about that.
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting concept again, and it's possible that you are correct. I've not ruled anything out.
I tricked you.
Just
kidding.
I've not said that there's absolutely no way in which our galaxy or our sun could be interacting with others. I said that there's not a good reason to believe that it's happening right. At a level.
The only reason I touched on this paragraph is because it's the only paragraph where I could find some pebble of verbiage that I thought I could use against you. I don't think it matters. I mean, if there's an atom in my toe that is completely unaffected by an atom at the top of my head, I really don't get the point. But for some reason, I felt it worthwhile to argue with you about it last week and this week. Anyways, and I'm also not arguing that the universe is a human body. I was just exploring the idea that if there was only one place in our universe that had life, and that life demonstrated consciousness, then we're done with the argument. But anyways, let's move on where I am torn to shreds here, just for a moment. Let's see. Joey makes a comment about scientists holding the null position. I'm going to touch on this and then we're going to move on. Okay, so he says Joey makes a comment about scientists holding to the null position being incapable of moving study forward, which is utterly absurd. Utterly absurd. Sorry, I should have read it that way the first time. A null hypothesis is what you default to should your experimental hypothesis not be borne out. If, for example, we see a new star in the sky and hypothesize that it is composed of hydrogen and helium, but a stellar spectroscopy, is that spectroscopy or spectroscopy?
Generally the latter.
Okay, spectroscopy experiment shows spectral lines that don't remotely resemble those of hydrogen and helium, then we discard the experimental hypothesis and default to the null hypothesis until we have an experimental hypothesis that matches with the data. Okay, so I agree with all that. And I probably was not clear last week, or I was just trying to make you wrong. But what I believe about the null the null position is that it is a good position, but that you cannot move forward by always taking the null position. That it takes dreaming and imagination and guessing to move away from the null position, and then it takes testing and experiments to determine whether those things are the right direction to go. And the scientific method is a great way to test those things out. But you cannot always take the null position. One must first dream or guess or use your imagination or extrapolate. What do you think?
I think that that's actually a very, very good point. That the imagination, the guesswork, and the dreaming is a crucial aspect to it, which is what we tend to describe in the colloquial sense as genius. When it happens in a scientific realm. I mean, the reason that Albert Einstein is a household name is because he was able to dream, imagine, and guess about things that nobody else had ever been able to dream, imagine, or guess about it. He was able to frame things in a different way and to understand things in a different way and to extrapolate from some information that this might be true. But he's not the only person who's ever thrown out hypotheticals or hyperbolic statements even. He was the first one to be able to do that in a way that was coherent, made sense, and when tested, held up to the evidence and turned out to be actually correct. So just because somebody throws out some wild and interesting guesses doesn't mean that the guesses are true.
It also doesn't mean that they're wild. They just seem
wild is, I think, a relative term.
Yes, but
in that respect,
I want to distinguish between somebody who is just randomly making up a story of science fiction and somebody who has learned something about our universe and thought a lot about it and rolled it around in their mind and has not yet done anything technical yet, but somehow their brain sees something and they may not even know why. They think that something is correct and they need to be tested. Those our wonderings, our imaginations, they need to be put to the test. They need to be criticized, and that's all good things. But that sort of imagination is not always as wild as it first seems. Sometimes people have reasons that they may not even understand until they really fully explore it. Our brains, I believe, are often more powerful than our consciousness can keep up with.
I'll grant you that. I think that what we're discussing here is the necessity and the power of conjecture, not necessarily the scientific method, as it were, but the
little bit of both.
The inspiration of the scientific method and the way that things work. So yes, it's absolutely necessary that we establish conjectures and that we throw out ideas and go, what if? I mean, that's a huge part of the scientific world. But the thing is, we can't go from what if to what is without testing in between.
Sure. But we don't have a lab here on this show, so
That's okay, though, because we can depend on other people's work, too.
That's right. And also we can depend on my wit.
We're not going to get as far on that, but...
Why are you always so insulting to me?
That's the best part is he's like, I really like this casual debate format, and, it could really be accessible for other people. And it's like the conversational and casual debate doesn't allow for some of the procedural. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it's funny that you'd think that we don't like each other because that's true.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a moment, and let me just ask the question: why haven't I won the debate yet? Isn't this over? Haven't I won?
Is this a conjecture that we're going to test?
No.
Because this seems pretty wild and crazy reasoning
I
from my
claimed at the
perspective here.
beginning of this when we just started this discussion that all I wanted to demonstrate was that we came from a conscious and willful creator who was larger than ourselves, not our parents. And we both agreed on that term. And we have been arguing and arguing about how this relates to the universe, but long before that, I demonstrated that the earth was conscious and willful, and that we came from it.
Well, you argued that the human, well, you did the life on Earth, yes, and you're right.
And the only
I'll
way I'm
grant
going
you
to
that.
lose
But
is
the
if you back up
question
and
here,
change your position, because you agreed to all of it.
well, no, that's not entirely true because the question that we agreed to discuss was, is there or should we believe in a God? And then we defined God, and what I think you're doing is revealing. And I should say that you offered the definition to God, and I did agree to that, but I tried to make a caveat there.
What was the
That
caveat? Help
that
me
was
remember.
the one that is concerned with our individual
Okay,
activities.
I told you I would toy with that, but that wasn't how we didn't go into this argument with that caveat. Okay, and we can toy with that, but before we do, I just want I just want to talk about this one thing. I want to hear an atheist say that I'm right. Can I hear that?
Well, well, let me say this, that I think that you have effectively proven how important it is to pay very, very, very close attention to the exact wording of how somebody is defining something, to make sure that it in any way remotely resembles what you're trying to actually talk about.
Let me ask our crew, do we have the technology where I can reach through the screen and strangle a Skype participant?
Joey, I think you want to hear me say that you're right, and I will happily tell you you are correct on this one. That the human race, the life on Earth interacts in a way that can resemble a form of consciousness. It did give rise to each of us individually, may have given rise to itself. But I think that Michael also hit on that in saying that the conscious, willful creator needs to be uh, a three, or all three states would need to be present at the same time. And if we're to define the consciousness on Earth, as in all life on Earth, to be this manner, then there obviously was a beginning of the life on Earth. And to say that that came from a conscious, willful creator
Okay,
when it
hold
itself would
hold on.
constitute
Now
a.
he said that all three needed to exist at the same time, as we stand today. And by the way, I am totally toying with Michael's letter. I think that it was a brilliant letter, but that doesn't mean that I agree with all of it, and that we are now using his letter as a standard to move forward in this argument. Now, I do agree that all three of those qualities need to exist at the same time, and here we stand on an earth that I have argued, and I think I have demonstrated that under any other circumstances, but this argument, you would agree that this earth and the people on it as a whole have a consciousness, they have a will, and that we come from this. This is where we come from. Now, if you want to say, well, in order for it to be a deity, it must have always been. I don't agree with that, because the way that we have viewed all deities, some of them have always been, but some of them have not.
That's true, and I'll grant you that the you certainly, if we are to define things in the way that you're looking at it now, it does certainly stand to reason that yes, we are a product of a conscious and willful creator. That conscious and willful creator would be the planet Earth in that
Right.
respect. So I'm happy to concede that. But I do want to say that the we, I think, is a bit of a shell game in that respect, in saying that we're using the we and saying we are the product of a conscious and willful creator, or you or I am, in a way that is narrowed down to the individual level, and then using the collective we, or oneness of all things, to prove that any individual part of it is a product of itself. I think that it's a far more difficult conclusion to make that the oneness of all life on Earth, as that collective consciousness, is the product of a conscious and willful creator
Well,
in that
that's
respect.
fine, and that wasn't my intent in this argument. Nor am I arguing that this is it. That's all there is. All that I claimed going into this argument is that I could demonstrate the existence of a conscious and willful creator. Now there are deities in our mythology that came from other things, and the earth certainly did come from something else, and so in a sense I'm toying here. I don't think it's fair to call this a shell game, because I am simply claiming that the earth is one whole thing with many parts, and that the smaller parts of it were created by it. And I don't think that that's unfair. I don't think that I'm shifting shells or changing terms. I'm simply presenting a model in which we have a conscious and willful creator, and nor am I completely toying, because I think it's important to note that we live in a world where the decisions that we make as individuals can often have large and very consequential. I will say the word in a moment. Very consequential effects on us that are much bigger than ourselves, and may not have even been our actual intent. We have made decisions that were small decisions on an individual level, but yet we are destroying our planet because of these small decisions. And religious people in this world are arguing that some of the things that are happening, these natural disasters, that it's the will of God, and He's punishing us, and it's His wrath. And in one sense, I say that's completely foolish. These are just natural disasters. But in another sense, it's possible that some of these natural disasters come from, or these natural phenomenons that can destroy whole cities, come from our decisions as human beings to pollute this planet, and to make it a little more erratic than it used to be. And so that's why I kind of threw in that little thing at the end of the first show where we started this, that if what I'm saying is right in any sense, that in a sense God is what we make Him. In this sense, I'm not saying there's not something bigger, but we come from a conscious and willful creator that if we make the wrong decisions, it can get very angry.
I can't disagree with anything that you said there. I think that is a beautiful uh, and poetic way to describe the way that the planet interacts with itself. I'm a self-avowed socialist, so I very strongly am influenced by the collective consciousness and things of that nature, as far as our or the understanding of that. So yes, I certainly agree that that's a very, very important thing
Yeah.
for us to recognize and for us to look at. I will, however, say, because I am tenacious like this, that I really thought that this, when we were coming into it, was going to be about, if people should believe in a God. Not about whether people should respect the environment. So
Well,
it was a wonderful point, nuanced, but I feel like this is a way of um, sort of changing the entire goal of the game to find a way to win when you
no,
realize the
no.
rest of it's gone.
Never try to predict where I'm going, Brahe. When you think I'm over here, I'm going to be over here. When you think I'm over here, I'm going to be over here. I'm like that. I'm quick like that. But I wasn't, I'm not trying to change the game. I'm trying to show you something that I've thought about that I think is surprising and interesting. And it does demonstrate a conscious and willful creator that any atheist that can relax and have a little sense of humor could probably wear a T-shirt that says, I believe in this God. And and I believe in that God. I'm not saying again that there's not something bigger, but I haven't thought that far, and But I'm just saying, I think we have the evidence to believe in this God, and to know that the decisions that we make affect this God, and He can respond, and He can send a tornado, but it doesn't have to do anything to do with whether you're gay, or whether you're black or white or Chinese or heterosexual, or whether you've been stealing. It has to do with other things like whether you've been cleaning up your messes, whether you've been responsible with the people and the natural things that you have around you, and whether or not when you discover that mining for coal is going to destroy the atmosphere, whether or not you decide to stop. It has to do with stuff like that.
Again, I have to agree. I have to say that this is a God, a usage of that term that I certainly can believe in and agree is it's irrational to not believe in on that level. But I once again, just the tenacious atheist here in me is going to say that when I look at the term God on a common and cultural usage level, I think that we've defined this outside of the scope of what one or about all but 1 in a million people or even more who use the term God.
I will absolutely grant you that 99.999% of theists would disagree that that's a God. They would be right alongside with you, Greg. They would say, you're right, Greg. He hasn't proven the existence of God. Yay, Greg. All these theists would be on your side.
But I think that that's a significant thing to recognize.
The question is, are you going to side with those atheists, or are you going to side with me?
Well, I
think
if you
that win this debate, you're on their side.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that you've hit on a really, really excellent point here, though, in that the term God is one that is used so flexibly in so many different ways that it can lose all meaning if we define it
all words
as
can.
Basically whatever. That's true.
All words have usage and not meaning, and you can use. I can say God, and what I can mean is that microphone stand over there.
Foot.
Yeah, I can mean anything by it. But the task here is to demonstrate that there is, if we break it down to, if we break it down to a point to where most atheists would disagree, that there is no conscious and willful creator larger than ourselves from which we come, then I can show that most atheists are taking a narrow view, and I believe that it's because they have been so dogged by theists that they refuse to go down that road at all. It is like fingernails on a chalkboard. But I think that there is an argument to be made that there is something that has life much bigger than us, that we are a part of and that we come from and that we should pay attention to.
I would beg to differ on that one. I think that your perspective on atheists might be a little bit filtered there as well, in saying that we would reject something, the conscious and willful creator, if so explained, is a much...
It has taken me hours to get you to agree with me.
Well,
and you're one of the best atheists that I know.
It took you hours to thoroughly explain what you were actually talking about, because, again, you're using the term in such an incredibly unconventional way that it does take hours to get somebody to... I mean, the term God in the cultural memescape has a set of definitions that most people are familiar with and can grasp intuitively, but yours is so far outside of that.
But it does not escape the definition that we agreed to.
It's true that
I think it's valid. I think it's valid to say
use that definition.
I think it's valid to say that we entered this discussion on different sides of an argument in which you said we cannot demonstrate that we come from a conscious and willful creator, and I said we could. And I have shown that we can, and we both agreed that we were talking about a deity and we were talking about a God, and that was a perfectly valid, abstract definition of one.
It's true, and I think, once again, that you've shown the importance of fully thinking through all of the potential consequences of the definitions that you're choosing. Because I would not feel personally that the use of the term God for what we've described is and I'll say justifiable, even though words don't have technical usages in that respect, but justifiable in the fact that I think it takes it so far out of the scope that anybody hearing you say it
Yeah.
is simply going to be confused
All
by
right.
what you.
Let
If
me
I
say,
were to say, well, there's a God that I believe in here, and I'm an atheist, that right there doesn't make sense. That just it's a contradiction in terms
okay.
to say
Let me just say this: that it
But
is frustrating the hell out of me to not see you completely concede to my point, but at the same time, I totally agree that the term God is way overused. I think I just like to hear you say, yes, there is a God. Yes, there is because, and I don't even, I love your position as an atheist. It just strikes me as funny. I want to hear you say it about 10 times before the show is over because it is just amusing the hell out of me. But
I feel like this is going to get auto-tuned and turn into a song like I'm an atheist and yes, there is a God. It's
all
like
right,
I'm going to end up with
somebody
that like
make
I
that
Love
happen
Cats
for us.
crazy video.
Yeah. So I already, I actually do think that we're done with this discussion, and I think that you would agree that I kind of made my point. Kind of. You'll at least agree that I kind of made my point.
I will agree that you made your point. Actually, it's not even that you kind of made your point.
Okay,
I just don't. I don't think that the point that you made was anywhere near the point that I thought you were trying to make.
You just want to back
coming
up
into.
and say you shouldn't
So.
you shouldn't have agreed to my definition somehow, but I think it's fine. And Michael Ashworth is probably coming out of his skin right now with all kinds of comments. Perhaps he'll come and take your place.
Well, no,
one
because
day.
Michael Ashworth said in his that there's gods that he'd believe in. Now, he did say that's the only God I
No,
believe
he
in.
said that he would only believe in a God if you defined it as something that exists.
That's true.
And I agree with both of you that we should not call it God. God has too much baggage. But I use it as a shortcut and possibly as a bad habit, and that is all.
Right, and that's the point that I'm trying to get to is that there's so much baggage with the term that I think that we are doing harm to the concept by using the term God, at least as long as the cultural understandings of that term and the traditional understandings are as prevalent as they are.
Yeah.
We could adopt a term that, say Thor, give it a very specific god, or let's say Gaia, to go more pagan in that respect, but that is Earth as a god in a very traditional sense. So, yes, to say that Gaia exists is perfectly rational in that respect. To even use that term in the way that we just discussed using the term God, I think it makes even more sense because there's much less baggage in the cultural.
But I think I think there's value, and I think it's really amazing to think about how much life our planet has that is so much larger than ourselves and that we are part of. We have 2 minutes left, and I want to suggest to you a new topic to talk about. And I'm going to watch you raise your eyebrow because you just know that I'm going to pull something crazy on you. What I want to discuss, I want to make the claim that the Bible is as valuable as our best science books.
As valuable for what?
Well, we will get more into that. We'll get more into that, and you don't have to agree to anything that you don't want to.
I was going to say, this feels like a trap in definitions again.
No. We'll talk, and we won't. We'll define what is meant, and we won't move forward in our definitions until you're happy, as we never have. You have always had freedom of choice. You can always slow this argument down as much as you want, and you still can't.
It's true, but I feel like you're just a better chess player than me in that respect.
Well,
planning
that's
out
too bad
the
for you.
moves
That's too
further
bad.
in advance. But I also have to say that in this debate, I feel like we were playing chess, or the feeling I'm getting is as if I was playing chess, and you moved your piece to the other end of the board and yelled, "King me!"
Oh, that is
so.
That's a low blow. That's a low blow, Brahe. That's a low blow, Gerg. It's a low blow. Take it back.
So, yes, I would be happy to
take it
discuss
back.
that
Come on,
next
take that
week.
back.
Oh, no, I'll king your piece. It's okay.
Good.
You're right. That God exists.
I can't believe you said that. All right. Greg really does hate me. I think soon we will be discussing this topic. The Bible is as valuable as our best science books. We'll see you next time.